In researching this time period of our grandparents, I came across quite a few interesting things that I'd like to make note of. In trying to find where Alert was quite a problem, because there was no recent maps showed the town of Alert. And it took me quite a while, and I didn't find it until I happened to look into that map book that you see in the video. And there was the town of Alert. So in 2009, my wife and I and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Kathy and Don Brewery, went up there. We've been up there, Cheryl and I have been up there twice. We went 2009 with Kathy and Don, and then 2011 ourselves. But anyways, the 2009 trip, unfortunately I forgot to take the camera with me, but anyways, when we got up there in that area, we started looking for the town, and we couldn't see anything. Of course, it's all gone now. And there was this gentleman cutting lumber on this on Highway 577 there, fairways up it, and in a field there. And so I went over and started to ask him about it. And he said, "Oh," he says, "yeah." His name was Gary. He said, "You got to talk to my mother-in-law." So he phoned her right away on his cell phone there, and I was talking to her, and her name was Bonnie Martin. And she knew where Gary was, and she pointed out, she says, "You look to the south there, and you see that house." And she said, "That's where the Alert post office was." And she said, "There's a lady there now that delivers the mail locally, and I guess there's a bit of a post office." And I went down and talked to her when we were there. And she thought the post office had been there too, but it turns out that it actually was across the road, we found out later. But anyways, we talked to him, and as I say, talked to her. I got her email address off her, and then we drove down, because she told us what road it was, concession 4 there, and we drove down that road, and there's nothing on it but bush, and it's quite narrow. And until you get, I don't know, it goes quite a ways until you get to the end, and there's one house there, and there was a van in the driveway. So I pulled in, and it turned out an elderly gentleman named Jim Wooten lived there. And his nephew had just got there a few minutes before we did to pick him up to take him somewhere for an appointment. And but he was telling us that he moved there when he was 12 years old, and which was in the 40s. He didn't remember. He remembered other people's names, but he didn't remember anything but Pellings, of course, because they were gone by this point. But anyways, after we got back home, I emailed Bonnie Martin to make sure I had her email right, and I had gotten Jim's name wrong, and the first email was August the 1st. I got back from her, and she said it was Wooten, I think, and his name is Jim. And she was asking me about what my grandparents' names were then. So anyways, in a subsequent email I told her, and a few other things we corresponded back and forth. The most significant ones, though, are the later ones. I just have to bear with me because I made notes to keep myself straight, because I'll get rambling. Okay, her grandmother taught in that school that you see in the picture in the video that settlers built. She taught there in the mid-50s, and they called it Stock School. Now, Bonnie's mother married a Kaza, a gentleman named Andrew Kaza, and Anita, her mother's sister, married Ray Kaza. The name is significant. And in this email in August 15th, she talks about it, who they married, and about the post office. We got talking about the post office. But when she starts talking about our grandparents, when they went back, they left one Pelling boy and a horse. They were just going to send for him, and when they got more money. And this is from her aunt. or her, yeah, her aunt Anita is saying this. It's not Bonnie saying it. But these people were the $600 settlers that came in the early 30s and lived up that road. So they still, at this point, when in 2009, they still talk about them as the $600 men. But which is interesting. But anyways, I think the Pelling boy and the horse she's talking about is Ron. And she didn't know what. And anyways, she goes on and says, anyways, the Casa boys went up the road and seen this Pelling boy that had been left alone there. They took him and his horse to their place for a few days and fed him, etc. And then he went back home with his horse. She doesn't remember what happened after, but presumed he was sent for by the family and after they made a bit of money to get him back to Toronto. Well, I think I've got Uncle Ron's papers from when he was in the armed forces, and one of the things is an application after he got back for jobs, and he's putting out, he had to write down, where he had worked before, and one of them was a from 1938 to 40, about 2.5 years, he worked for McNamara construction company in Shillington, which is just down on Highway 101 at the bottom of 577 there. And so that's where he disappeared to. I guess they didn't see him after he went there. Then after that he went down to Toronto, which is a whole other story. She talks about a couple other things, and she says, my dad used to call the road Settlers Line. It's now called Elk Road West. And then she asked, do you have an uncle, Dave Pelling? My aunt remembers that name. And we do have an uncle named Dave Pelling. And then an email the next day I got from her, she says, my aunt didn't know how old the Pelling boy that was left behind, which is Uncle Ron, but she says she heard her husband, Uncle Ray, and my other Uncle Ted talk about Dave Pelling a lot. And that's, I guess the Pellings made a bit of an impression up there. And so, that was interesting information. One of the other things is that in doing the research, I came across this Ontario Genealogical Society pamphlet they put out called Families, and in the February 2004, there's an article written called the Back to the Land Movement, 1932 to 35, by Bruce W. Taylor from New Liskeard, Ontario, and he describes about what the settlers that were up there, and he's talking more around Temiskaming, but it's of course all of Ontario, or people were from all over the place, and it covers of course where our grandparents were, and he tells how to get a hold of the files. And that's how I found out how to get hold of the files that they're at the MNR in Peterborough. But a bit of a struggle. It was quite a struggle getting them files from them. Some people that I know tried to get them and never did, I don't think. Another interesting is this Northern Doctor, a book by Clifford Hugh Smiley, MD. And actually it's compilation of his notes and memoirs, and then it was finally compiled by his wife, Mary Bell Smiley, in later years. But anyways, he talks about actually going down that road. I'm pretty sure he doesn't actually say the name in the part, but it sure sounds like the road that they lived on in a very bad snowstorm, and using an old snowmobile type thing that they had way back then. So all that was really interesting. Anyways, that's it. Bye.